Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Developing Content for Every Stage of the Customer Lifecycle. I'm Kim Zimmerman, Senior Managing Editor of Demand Gen Report. I'll be your moderator for this presentation. Today's webinar is designed to help you create content that can answer buyers' questions and generate conversations as they progress through the various stages of engagement. This session is part of our week-long Lead Lifecycle series and is designed to give our audience real-world insights into how progressive B2B marketing companies are interacting with prospects at each stage of the buyer's journey. This is the final webinar in the series, and all of them are available on demand. Just a little bit about the social aspect of our webinar. We want to encourage you to follow along and share your thoughts and feedback during today's webinar on social media using the hashtag LLCseries. You can also connect with us using the at DG_report Twitter account, or reach out to me directly. My Twitter handle is at KimZim2764. And our other presenters today, Dana Harder and Tonya Venus, their Twitter handles are up there as well. We'll let you know about a fun contest we have going on. Each session you attend from the Lead Lifecycle series, you're entered to win an item from our prize box. Each registrant is allowed up to 12 entries. The prizes in the box include one Microsoft Surface 3, one Apple Watch Sport, one Fitbit Flex, and 3 tickets to our upcoming Content to Conversion conference. Just to let you know a little bit about Demand Gen Report, I'll provide a quick overview. We're an all-digital media company publishing daily news, a weekly email newsletter, special reports, original research, and a rich menu of additional resources. In addition, we produce the annual Content to Conversion live event. If you haven't done so already, please join the 30,000 plus subscribers to our weekly newsletter. Visit our recently updated website at demandgenreport.com to sign up. For today's presentation, we're using the On24 platform. During the presentation, you can access all the information you need from the platform's toolbar. We encourage you to ask our presenter questions. To do so, simply click on the Q&A widget at the bottom of the screen. Today's session is being recorded, and all attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation that you can go back to and review or share with your colleagues. Before I introduce our featured speaker, one last housekeeping detail. Today's presentation is slated for 20 to 30 minutes with 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. Following the presentation, be sure to submit your questions using the Q&A widget on the On24 console. Okay, now I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. As Vice President of Content Strategy for Content for Demand, Dana Harder strives to provide our clients with the knowledge and tools needed to execute a content marketing strategy that provides value and results. On a personal note, Dana wants to live in a world where coffee comes out of a faucet perfectly brewed and the benefits of exercise come in pill format. When she's not taking care of her amazing clients or family, you can find her at her favorite yoga studio, meditating, or at least trying to. Tonya Venus has more than 20 years of experience in B2B storytelling in her role as Senior Content Strategist for Content for Demand. She has broad language, visual, and vertical expertise, honed from previous roles as a business journalist, print and digital editor for B2B magazines, websites, and books, and owner of a content creation consulting business. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dana.
Thank you so much, Kim, for that introduction. So today's webinar, we're going to focus on developing content for every stage of the customer life cycle. And we're going to take a look at the funnel and talk a little bit about how we can plan more strategically up front when we're creating content, and then learn to leverage that content across the entire funnel. Before we do that, though, I want to take a few minutes for fun and take a look at the evolution of content marketing and remind us where we came from so we can take a look about where we're at now. So if we agree with this cartoon, we all sat in the room one day and said, oh, our customers aren't going to buy for us unless we do something. So the concept of nurturing comes to life, and we realized that we actually have to build relationships with our prospects and our clients in order for them to buy from us. And we're doing that through the use of content. Then we decided we needed a way to measure that. And I think most of our funnels, if they don't, they did look like that. And then the big dilemma is sales and marketing needed to learn to play nice together. And I don't think we're quite there yet, 100%, but we're all making progress, right? Where does that leave us now? So if we look at the funnel today, this is where most of us are headed or are at. And this funnel actually comes from our friends at Bluebird Strategies, and I love to use it because it's one of the few funnel pictures that I find that doesn't paint this as linear, because it's not, right? I mean, when we look at how funnels or how leads move into the funnel and through the funnel, they're going all around and back again and re-nurtured and maybe compliance, and we have to sell them again. So this is a much more complex system than what most funnels, I believe, paint. So when we look at where we are today with our content strategies, we're developing a lot of content. We started really heavy at the top of the funnel with lead gen. And so we needed all this content to support all of our demand generation efforts. And, you know, slowly we're starting to see that content can also help support sales. So now we need sales enablement content. We also have this dilemma that we have all these customers now who bought from us, and they need to rebuy from us or keep buying from us. And we can also support that effort with content. So now we have this big funnel, and we have a lot of content needs to support it. And the reality is that none of us have the time nor the funds to actually fuel this kind of model. So what does that mean, and where do we need to get to? So when we look at content creation, we want to take a step back, and we want to start looking at creating content for the entire funnel. And that gets complicated because that means I can no longer just sit in a room and decide I'm going to do a white paper today for the trade show that's coming up, or design a white paper for the website. When, in order to get to this model where I'm creating a piece of content that can actually be leveraged across the entire funnel, I need to actually plan when and how that content is going to be used up front. That's going to allow me to leverage my investment and create less pieces of content that are more meaningful for the right person at the right stage of the buyer's journey. This health check that we have here, we're going to talk about this more later on, but it was created by one of our clients, or we created it for our clients, Cox Media, and it's a great asset because it actually can be used top of the funnel, it can be used as a sales enablement tool, and it could be used for existing clients. So this piece actually has multiple purposes, and it can be used at multiple stages. So how do we plan? What does that mean when we're creating content? If anyone sat in our webinars before, we're huge fans of this slide here. This is a Serious Decision slide that comes from their messaging Nautilus. And it's great because it breaks it down into the steps that we need to do when we're creating content. If we're creating content for one of these steps in here, it's going to have value across the funnel, it's going to be used, it's going to be heard, it's going to be read, and it's going to help progress people in whatever stage of the funnel it's being used in. It takes account the persona, which Tanya is going to talk about more, takes into account the value proposition, and then it filters into the narrative elements that we actually need to tie into the content. So this essentially gives us the blueprint for how we should be creating every piece of content. And I'm going to break it down and show you samples of the type of content you should be creating along each of these stages. Okay. So one of the biggest questions we're asked is what type of content should you be using at these different stages of the funnel? And I hate to get hung up on the asset type because the reality is there's some general rules of thumb, but at the end of the day, it's more important that you're talking to the persona and that you are actually creating content for each specific stage of the buyer's journey. And often the type of asset doesn't matter. But there are some general rules of thumb, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But don't get too hung up on this. I mean, in ROI calculator, we've got in selection. Depending on how you design that ROI calculator, it very well could have a place in the education as well as the solution phase of the buyer's journey as well. All right, so the first phase of this is education, loosening the status quo. In this phase, we're doing a lot of visual content, infographics, assessments, motion graphics, guides, blogs, social, ebooks even in this early stage. But the goal here is not the type of asset you're using. It's to make your prospect believe that they have a problem, bring awareness that there's a challenge or a solution they might be facing, awaken them to a new trend. This is really where you are just trying to get them to see that there may be a solution, there may be a problem or something they need to address. And then we need to get them to commit to the change. So once we've agreed that there's a problem, I need them to want to make a change. So the assets that we're going to see here are very much tied to, are very similar to the first stage, but you're going to start to see a little more depth, right? So ebooks play a really good part here. You know, the first stage, an infographic, I can choose not to gate that. I can build that trust. I can make them see that as a problem. I can get into the second phase. I can present them with an ebook or a guide, a best practices guide, and help them see that they can commit to this change, and I can gate that asset. The two assets that we have here, which are great examples of this, is that marketing health check that we referenced earlier. This is actually an interactive checklist that you can walk through and check and see, is my marketing plan healthy, right? So that, and when I see that it's not, or it's not where it should be, then I know that I need to make a change, so it's going to help me commit. This other asset as well is, you know, a way to future-proof my animation studios. So if I'm looking to build something up for the future, this guide is going to tell me what I need to do. And the goal of it is that when I get through it, most people are not going to be there. So again, it's painted the picture that I need to commit to change in order to get there. So the next phase is the solution. And there's two touches here as well. And the first one is exploring possible solutions. Now, we often see people get hung up here on the difference between solution and product. Exploring possible solutions is not exploring possible products. We are not talking about your product here. We are not talking about any product here. We are talking about an overall solution to the challenge or problem we've convinced them that they've had and that they want to make a change to. So this is still pretty high level. At this stage, we'll see white papers introduced, things like whiteboard videos, checklists and Q&As are starting to come into play. We will see some case studies, but case studies at a high level. We don't want product-focused case studies at this level. These are high-level solution-focused case studies. So as you can see, these two samples that are up, one is a buying guide to online community platforms. It's going to give me everything I need to know to make an educated purchasing decision for this solution, not a product. I've got a powerful next generation proposal, what I need to know to make great proposals so I can pick the right solution, not a product. And then, very similar to the education phase, I need them to commit to that solution. And in this area, you know, it's very similar content, white papers, whiteboard videos, checklists, very similar to what we saw. But let's focus on this direct energy sample, this is relative purchasing solar power. So if my decision is deciding if solar power is right for me, this is going to give me everything I need to know to make that decision and decide if I can commit to that solution. And so the content tends to get a little bit deeper here. If you're in a technical vertical, it's going to get definitely more technical, so you can make the case on why they need to commit to the solution at this point. And then we're at the vendor selection phase. and I need to justify the solution. I need to make a business case for why I need to put that solution in place. Again, if you notice, we're still not talking about product. This is still at the solution level. And what I like to point out here is that you'll see a lot of ROI calculators, TCO calculators. Checklists are great in this phase. We're seeing a really high conversion with checklists because they're really meaty and they can give me 10 questions to ask, 10 steps to take, 10 things to avoid as I'm trying to justify this business solution. And then we're at the vendor selection phase, and testimonials and case studies are logically a great choice for this stage. And Tanya's actually going to talk about this one. This is a great example of a case study portfolio from Autotask, and she'll talk about that later on. But I think what's important here is if you don't have testimonials, there's ways to skirt around that. You can help them justify the solution with some of these other assets. Q&As are a great tool for actually, it's really just asking the question and providing the answer. So it's giving them those last few questions or concerns they may have as they're trying to justify that solution. So if you can't get a customer to talk, don't feel like you can't find the right asset here. It's just about thinking it through and making sure that the message that's being relayed is answering this question or essentially justifying the solution. So what does that look like in a campaign? Here's 4 assets, so it's not even 6. It doesn't do all of the stages in there, and that's okay. But I've got 2 pieces that kind of fall in that education phase. And then I've got this plan early, plan often. That's helping me plan my marketing plan. That falls in that solution phase. And then I have an ROI calculator to help me with the spending to see where I'm at and help me select what I need to be doing. So, it looks complex when we look at it, but when we break it down like this, depending on how long your buyer's journey is, who you're talking to, 3 or 4 touches can actually drive this all home, as long as they're well thought out and well planned up front, and you've thought about how they're going to be used. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Tanya, who's going to talk to us a little bit about personas and understanding our buyers, and then how to modularize content so that you can leverage it better across the plan.
Thank you, Dana. Excellent presentation, and thanks to our attendees for joining today. So the first step to understanding buyer needs through the sales funnel stages is to find out as much as you can about your target buyers. How deeply you go with this depends upon a lot of factors, but a good place to start is with basic information. And the good news about this basic information is that you probably already possess it. This is a template from Serious Decisions that kind of follows the slide that Dana used and spells out some steps to get from very basic information about your buyers to an effective content plan. Right now, I just want to look at the first step, which it's okay if you can't read it. I'll just tell you that this is all basic information: industry trends, regional variations, company size. This is all information that you have, right? So if nothing else, documenting this basic information can tell you a lot. Large enterprise buyers, for example, have a different set of challenges often than SMB buyers and vice versa. So once you have all the basic information, you can use personas to go deeper. Personas are a foundational piece of content marketing and lead generation, and they are really, truly necessary. Here's an example for a technology buyer. These individual categories will vary based on what you need to know to create effective content, but a persona should always include pain points, things that the buyer is worried about, and the buyer's goals, because this is where you'll be able to find where your buyer needs help and where you can provide insight that makes a difference. As Dana said, not necessarily products or solutions are you thinking about at this point, but where can you provide insights that makes a difference? The isolation of challenges, goals, work styles, content preference, and other information is also vital to create an effective content plan. And here's how it becomes effective over the buyer stages. This can be kind of hard to read, but basically what we've done here is we've taken the pain point for a buyer, in this case a data management team leader, and we articulated how that pain point would be and what information that buyer would be looking for as they educate themselves about the topic or a solution to their pain. The pain point that is one that we're all familiar with here, we don't have enough people to do all the work that we need, and there's no possibility of us being able to hire anybody else. So ease of use and excellent management tools are what's needed to solve this pain. So what does it look like at every stage? Well, in the education phase, we start to talk about what a solution that would address this pain looks like. We reemphasize that the solution needs to have ease of use and excellent management tools, but then we also introduce the idea of scalability, because this is something we anticipate the buyer will be thinking about at this stage. Will this solution be good for me tomorrow and the next day and the next day? Then at the solution stage, we get a little more specific, and we present a vision of what the ease of use and scalability will look like by describing the controls, training, support, and upgrade process that the buyer needs to look for, going from general to specific, going from telling to showing. And then finally in the selection phase, we get to the money questions. As Dana had mentioned this, and we address the value of the productivity benefits, going from vision to implementation and answering specific questions that, let's say, influencers would have at this stage, people who are focused on the money questions, let's say. Now, how do we get all of that information that we use for the persona and then we used for the message mapping? Well, we do very deep quantitative and qualitative research on the industry and the buyers that our clients come to us with. But you might not be able to do all of that. So let's take a look at 3 questions that I call quick and dirty questions that will really help you to map your buyer's pain points across the buying cycle. What is the buyer doing at each stage of the cycle? This will let you know what kind of information they need at that point, at that stage, to be effective. And then overall, how can this buyer be the hero on the buying team? What can you equip them with that will lead them to success? If you can answer those questions, then you're going to be able to take the topics that you want to write about and go a little bit deeper about what those would look like at each stage and what type of content that buyer would need. And then once your content is deployed, you don't have to, or you shouldn't stop gathering information about the buyer, because content itself can provide you with a lot of insight, especially these days when things change very quickly in business, so your buyer's behavior or their buying reality could change. Dana talked about assessments and quizzes. These are great to get insight, internal insight. What did the buyer say versus what did you expect them to say? And if you're going to put an assessment or a quiz out there, go ahead and ask for some comments or a fill in the blank for other. This type of information, although sometimes people like to put little funny jokes in there, that's the exception, not the norm, and it's usually very good, deeper insight. Social activity is also another indicator of the buyer. What social platforms are they using? Also, action buttons, and when do they make the call to get in touch with your company. This can give you great information about whether your buying cycles you see your buying cycle in a length that's longer than reality. Perhaps, as Dana said, only 3 pieces of content is all you need. If they make the call at the 3rd piece of content, perhaps you plan for 5. You've just learned something that's going to save you time and money in the future. And then finally, how are they behaving with the content? If you give them a choice, you give them the same information in an infographic and in a white paper, what are they going to choose? This gives you information about content preferences that is real and actual. Now we're going to talk about how to leverage the content across the funnel with modular planning and repurposing, which are practices that can save you time and money and still help you to create very effective content. This is a table that represents 3 styles of modularity that I see and that we apply, and I have samples for them. But first I just want to go through a quick description of each of these. And you know, is modularity the same as repurposing something? Well, repurposing, I view it as sort of a subset of modularity. It's how you can achieve modular content planning through repurposing. So first we have the progressive plan, which is when you build different formats of content on the same topic, and you share more content as you build in new information, demonstrating the value proposition at each stage. For a shared or repurposing plan, it's when you have a story to tell and you tell that story in different formats, essentially using the same foundational information, but you go deeper, revealing specific details based on each stage. And then many-to-one is when you have a group of assets that are kind of the same, and you create a new piece of content based on them. So let's take a look at each of these with some real-life samples. Autotask is a content-for-demand customer that sells business and service delivery platforms to IT service providers. They're capitalizing on a trend among IT service providers to evolve their business models from a fixed fee to a managed service pricing. So they talk about managed services models quite a bit. Here you'll see that they have a progression talking on this topic. In the left corner, in the education stage, there's a blog with a very simple topic, 3 reasons to consider the managed services business model. This is an effort to disrupt the status quo and start embedding questions in the buyer's mind like, should I consider this evolution to a managed services business model? Then they held a hosted webinar that is actually now recorded on their website that focused on pricing in general for both the fixed fee and managed service provider, and emphasized how pricing varies for each and the benefits of the managed services model. Then we took that information from the webinar, which was quite a lengthy webinar, and we created a 5-step guide, which is to the far right. And this is complete with worksheets on how to evolve your pricing to a managed services model. This type of progression is good when you're introducing kind of a new idea, because you don't want to lay it out there all at once. You want to get the buyer interested and then answer those questions until they get to the point later in the buying cycle where they're asking, okay, how exactly would I implement this? And that's when you release the guide. Nanolumens is another C4D customer, and they sell customized LED display screens. Now I want to make a comment here. Dana was absolutely right in saying that early stage content shouldn't talk specifically about products. In fact, most of the content in the buying cycle shouldn't. But there's always room for the exceptions, and sometimes manufacturers such as Nanolumens are that exception. You know, when Nanolumens makes LED displays that people use in interior spaces. So when a casino or a shopping mall needs an LED display, they pretty much go online and search for information on the providers. They don't really have to be convinced that they have a need. They know they have a need. So this very first graphic is designed to answer questions once they start that search process. And Nanolumens emphasizes discoverability in their content marketing. Their goal when they started using content marketing was to shorten their time to close. So this On the left is the infographic, and why I think this was so effective. Oh, and by the way, they did shorten their average time to close from 1 to 2 years to 90 days. And here's why I think that they were able to do this. The infographic has questions in it that go from general to specific. Nanolumens makes displays only for the indoors. So the first question is, where's your display going to be, indoors or outdoors? Nanolumens also makes permanent displays, unlike some other LED providers. So the second question is your installation permanent or temporary? With those two questions, they were able to remove a lot of the noise in their pipeline so that what remained was people who were really interested in the Nanolumens products. And these questions continue. I think there's about 8 of them. So by the time a person goes through all 8 questions, they have a great idea of whether or not Nanolumens is somebody they want to continue talking to. In the middle section, you'll see that this was, the far right section, this is an ebook. Now they're going to start to talk a little bit more specifically about their products. And they actually have the 3 types of products shown there. Then in the middle, they have a customer service video. The videos that they have, and they use video quite a bit, are designed in some ways to answer questions for buyer influencers in the final stage, non-users. So your CFO types or your technology types who aren't necessarily going to be putting promotional content on these screens but want to know, hey, is this going to be a good investment, or is this going to be a pain in my butt as I have to train everybody to use it? So Nanolumens was able to take basically the same information that was in the infographic and repurpose it into an ebook and a video, but answer more specific questions at each stage. Finally, let's take a look at a couple of case study portfolios. You've seen the one on the right from Autotask, and the one on the left is from Crowe Horwath. These are examples of many-to-one modular content. Both of these companies used existing case studies to tell a new story. In the case of Crowe Horwath, they wanted to focus very specifically on this piece in streamlining the loan processing process. So they pulled out nuggets from their existing case studies that addressed that topic and compiled them all into one piece of content. Autotask, they merged with another company with some new technology that they renamed and then decided to introduce to new markets globally. So we took some of the existing case studies that the native company had, who created that piece of technology, and we turned it into a new piece for those new markets. I wanted to talk to you about just a couple other ways to be modular, and these are kind of like low-hanging fruit. Quote banks and stat banks. This is before you create a single piece of content, go through recent presentations that your executives have made or even that your customers have made on your behalf, and pull out some quotes that really convey the messages you want to use throughout the content. Perhaps you could put these in a Google folder for everybody to share as long as you can track them and not overuse them. Unique research is another excellent way to plan modular content because basically if you're going to do a survey, you can plant questions that will elicit the information you need to put together the types of content that you want. Also, engage your design team. They can help create templates and other design aspects that help with modularity. Remember, they want to make their processes as streamlined as possible too. Finally, I wanted to touch on the crucial late-stage content because often at this stage what you're doing is you're enabling your persona, your champion, to convince others within the organization that this is going to be a good investment. There are some points you need to keep in mind when you produce content to support the investment case. The first is you need to connect the content directly to top or bottom line benefits. And you need to use terms that influencer would use to understand that benefit. So use ROI, TCO, profitability, whatever is important to that company at that point. Show a clear path to adoption, because every company is terrified of downtime. It cuts into cash flow. It affects customer service. You want to be able to explain adoption of your content or solution in a way that does not instill fear, but actually instills confidence. Use an appropriate tone. Let's say that your persona is a DevOps person. This is probably going to be a young person, kind of a maverick, who doesn't have a lot of respect for traditional ways of doing things. But at some point, that DevOps person is going to have to talk to somebody on the financial team about the products they want to purchase. The tone is probably not the same for that financial executive. So you want to use an appropriate tone in the late stage. A neutral tone is fine. It'll work with everybody. Or you could use an executive tone. And then finally, make it easy. Don't get to the point quickly in late stage content, and anticipate as many questions as you possibly can. Thank you all so much for attending. It was a pleasure to talk to you today.
Great. Thank you, and Dana, for a great presentation. It sparked quite a few questions, and we've got a few minutes for those. So let's dive right in. From Heather, she wants to know: does the process for identifying the best content for each stage of the buying journey differ for account-based marketing? Where there are a number of individuals involved in the decision-making process. Dana, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'd love to. No, it doesn't really change, and here's why. Even if account-based marketing is the goal is to focus in on an account, and when we do that, we know certain things about them. But if we bring it back up to our persona buckets, those accounts have to fit somewhere. And so what we know is if we've done our persona work, we know information about them, and we're creating content for that persona. And you're still reaching out to them at different stages of the buyer's journey. So whether you're doing individual outreach to multiple people or however you're attacking that account, the content still needs to go back to that serious decision framework, and you have to go through the education, solution selection phases, even if it's at a more personal level.
Good point about the serious decisions framework, Dana. All right, we had another question come in from Arthur. He wants to know, can you share any best practices for metrics to track to see how each piece of content is performing at a particular stage of the lead life cycle?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Kim. Yes, there are definitely ways we can measure the success of the content. It gets really difficult if you don't have a marketing automation solution in place, right? The number one goal is if we have marketing automation in place, we're measuring opens, and we're measuring clicks, and we're measuring downloads, and that's giving us some insight. The other great thing that people can consider is some of the tools that you guys saw today, and the samples, that you saw today were created in some cool new tools, Uberflip being one of them, which is a flipbook, and Nextbook also is a flipbook type format. What these new tools allow us to do is actually give us some metrics on the back end on how people actually consume the content. So that gives us another layer that marketing automation always can't give us. So, if you have marketing automation, great. If you can start to expand your horizon and look at some new technologies for some tools, it'll give you some better metrics on the content and how well it's being consumed. Because, at the end of the day, we could have a really catchy title, really well-written email, and we get them to download it, but if it goes into their download folder, I have no idea if they actually consumed it. So with one of these tools, I actually know how long they stayed on a page, if they made it past page 5. So it gives me some insight into how to create better content long term.
Yeah, our annual, content preferences survey, indicates that interactive content is definitely something people are, looking to. So that's good to talk about that a little bit. All right, we got another question in from Jean. We didn't talk too much about webinars here. You know, is there, how do they fit into your overall content strategy? And, you know, is there a particular stage where you've seen webinars be more effective? You know, Tanya, maybe you can speak to that.
Sure, Kim. Webinars, truthfully, can be effective at any stage depending upon the content of the webinar and the buyers themselves. There's obviously a trend towards some shorter webinars, but really I think I see them most often used in the latter two phases that we discussed, education, solution, and selection. In either of these stages, you know, you want to make sure that the content is answering specific questions that the buyer has and is not too promotional. Webinars can be used to demonstrate a product. And again, depending upon what the situation is, such as our friends at Nanolumens, this might be something you do want to do in the early stage.
Good. Yeah, good point about not being too promotional. You got to be careful of the, you know, towing that line there. All right, we have time for one more question. It's from Lori. She wants to know, how do you keep tabs on the pain points that your buyers are experiencing, you know, and that you want to incorporate into your content? You know, how do you track that? Maybe Tanya, you have some thoughts on it?
Sure. Well, I did show earlier a couple ways that content itself can tell you if things are changing with your buyers. The other thing is follow that buyer community closely. Put an alert in your news feed. Start collecting any type of research that others are doing on that marketplace, and then use those to create questions that you yourself are going to seek out when you update your personas. So for instance, right now we're doing some work in the energy field, specifically in the oil and gas sector. And you would think that everybody in this sector is being affected by the drastic downturn in oil prices. But the truth is they're not. There are some companies they have diversified themselves enough that oil is a small portion of the work that they do. So we had to do some research to find this out as we were creating personas and message mapping. But how we were clued into this is just paying attention to who was laying people off and who was making announcements about pulling projects back.
Well, very good. Well, thanks to the audience, and thanks for everybody for their questions. Just one quick thing we want to let you know about before we conclude. We're excited to announce that registration will open for our next Content and Conversion Conference this coming Monday. The conference is taking place February 15th to 17th in 2016 in Scottsdale, Arizona. You want to check out the Content to Conversion webpage. It's right up there on Monday, and sign up to take advantage of the early bird pricing. And again, thanks to Dana and Tanya for sharing such great insights. Thanks to all for attending and for taking the time to join us today. That concludes our Lead Lifecycle series. It's been a great week. And just a reminder that all of our Lead Lifecycle series webinars will be available on demand. So you can access these presentations at any time, share them with your colleagues, and continue the Lead Lifecycle journey. Well, thank you, folks. Much appreciated, and have a great rest of the day.